Today, we're going to be looking at how much different age groups have saved on average into private pensions in the United Kingdom. And later on, we're also going to look at why the amount that the UK government owes to all of us Brits for the state pension has pretty much halved. But more on that later. To begin with, we need to have a look at the demographics and who has saved what. So in this analysis, we have the averages for each group from 2022, and the first broad section that we have is people aged 16 to 24. And you can see here that on average in private pensions, these people have £5,500 saved up, which isn't really that much, but is also not very surprising because this particular cohort are very young. They wouldn't have much saved up yet because they've only just started work, so they probably haven't contributed that much to their retirement yet. Obviously, we all have to start somewhere, so the fact that people do have some savings at this early age is definitely a good sign. The next category, we have a 25 to 34, and these people have £18,800 saved on average. And by average here, we're talking about the median. So we're not just taking the list of all the people who have savings in private pensions and dividing them by the number of people, we're taking the middlemost number. And the reason for this is because it tends to reduce the extremes in a particular data set. You can imagine if you had Elon Musk, that would drag up the average by quite a lot. If you have somebody who's fantastically wealthy amongst a group of other people who are very normal, it makes the average look very, very high. Whereas if you take the median, then you're taking the middle number and it disregards the weighting towards people who have exponentially more than other people. There's still a data point in there and they will move that median average very slightly across to the right by 1, but it won't have a disproportionate effect like it does with the mean. So this is the median figure, and this is 18,800 for people within the age category of 25 to 34. This is still not a great deal. These people are beginning their careers still and moving up kind of towards the middle of their careers when they get to the end of this particular band. So it's not hugely surprising again that there's not that much in here, but it is quite a bit more than the original category from 5,500. From here, we move into people who are solidly into their working life, from 35 through to 44, who only have 39,500 saved up. Yes, this is about £20,700 more than the previous cohort, but it's still maybe not as much as you might expect people to have on average as a middle value. From 45 to 54, this increases by £40,000 is actually quite a lot, and that goes up to 80k from 39,500 previously, which I suppose makes sense because people do tend to make the most in their final years of their careers before they retire or before they scale back. They're in management positions and have lots of responsibility, and obviously people's salaries typically tend to increase throughout their lifetime, throughout their career as they gain more experience and more skills, and they add more value to their employers and are able to command higher salaries. So it kind of makes sense that we've got this bigger gap growing and opening up for this particular decade of people, simply because they're able to have excess savings and more money going into the pot. So over time, they've actually managed to disproportionately add pension money to their pot now in their 40s and 50s. The next set of people that we see from 55 to 64 have actually added a surprising amount onto the total. This is 57,800 over the previous 80k that we saw before, for a total of £137,800, which is starting to become quite a lot. The compounding effect of people earning more up into their retirement years also has an impact on this, but also we have to remember that as people have more money within that pot itself is invested and is also achieving returns. So it's not out of the ordinary to see some kind of exponential coming through here as you're adding to the pot yourself year after year after year, as well as the pot itself making money back for you. This is the usual effect of compounding. What's interesting about 55 to 64 is that some of these people actually will probably be starting to use their pensions to draw it down. Previously, the private pensions could be taken at the age of 55. This has now moved up to 57, but it's still firmly within this banding. Many people won't do this because they'll still be contributing, working, and won't be taking an early retirement compared to other people, say, where the state pension is 66 up to about 68. But there definitely will be some people who will start to, take the tax-free lump sum, for example, that you can take out of that pension pot at this age. Moving up to 65 to 74, these people are definitely in the retirement age at this stage. And as we can see, there's only a small increase in the amount in these pots, up to £145,900, only about £800 more than the previous. With a lot of people in drawdown or buying annuities and things like that, it's not really that surprising. The state pension also kicks in at this point. Used to be 66, but it's now moving up to 68. So it's quite a lot later than the private pension, but that's supplementing people's incomes here as well, which maybe means they don't have to withdraw as much as you might think. From 75 plus, most of the pension pots probably will be drawn down at this point, which is why we now start to see our very first decrease down to 60,000. So for all people overall, the average pension pot through all the ages is £57,500 in 2022. The problem with these figures that do seem slightly worrying at first glance is that the numbers are only going down. If you look at the amount that people have in these private pensions, it has only been decreasing since June 2016, with the highs at 64,000 and going down to 60,700, 57,000, and then finally 57,500 in our final one, where we've only increased by £500. And this is despite inflation being quite rampant, especially over the last 3 years. So you can see that these pension pots now are not only smaller, but they're also worth less in today's money. The second awkward part about these figures is they're just nowhere near enough. The simplest way to show that this is the case is with annuity rates. This isn't the only way to use your pension, but it does produce easy numbers for us to work with. An annuity is where you buy a guaranteed income for the entire rest of your life. So you use all or part of your pension pot to buy this guaranteed income for the entirety of the rest of the time that you are alive, which gives some people peace of mind, but it also means that you're depleting your capital. Let's generously take the median value of £137,800 from the data, which represented the cohort that we're just about to enter into retirement. And what we're going to do is we're going to cross-reference this with the generic quotes that I grabbed from Hargreaves Lansdown, which are based on February 2025 rates. And this shows how much you'd be paid per year based on every £100,000 that you spend on the annuity. So in short, you're paying £100,000 and you're receiving this income for life. Now, there are a lot of numbers here, so I'll explain exactly what's going on. And there are many different tweaks that can be made to annuities, the most obvious one being your age. So the later that you take this annuity, the shorter that the annuity company is expecting you to live, and so the more that they will then pay you per year for the same annuity purchase price. A guarantee means that it continues to pay out for the first 5 years in this case, even if, say, you bought one and then died the very next day, which would obviously be very unfortunate. The one that includes RPI, you probably recognize this as one of the measures of inflation, and it means that the amount that you get each year is bumped up as time goes on, depending on whatever the RPI comes out over the lifetime of that annuity. This is similar to 3% escalation, except this one has the amount that it increases baked in up front, which is 3% in this particular case. As you can see, the ones that go up over time typically pay you a lot less to begin with, but that means that you're going to preserve the value of your money over time. And if you do live for a really long time, these flat annuities that don't increase anymore are really susceptible to inflation over the long run. So to keep things simple, we want to try to retire on £138,000 at 55 using the most generous figure, and this translates using the single life level with no guarantee to £8,717 per year, or £726 per month. If you retired 10 years later, then that would get you a bit more at £10,413 per year, or £868 per month, but it's still pretty meagre. And that is with annuity rates at their historic highs from recent history, thanks to mainly an increase in interest rates worldwide. The FT has been reporting recently that annuity sales in 2024 were the highest in 10 years, at least partially due to this fact. Before you get too despondent though, it is worth bearing in mind that this data is for private pensions only. Most people will be getting at least some state pension benefit along with this, depending on their national insurance contributions over their years of working. If you're someone with the full 35 years of qualifying national insurance, then you'll be entitled to the full state pension as well as anything you have privately, which currently is £11,502 per year, which is not bad. This would bring our median person in the first example from £8,717 a year to £20,219 a year, or £1,685 per month. As I said before, you're only going to get this state pension if you're relatively young at the age of 68. So this is a lot later than we'd be looking at taking our private pension, but at some point you do get this extra income kicking in, if we do actually get it by the time that we're all at that age. So combining them together, this is quite a bit better, but it is still a lot less than the median household disposable income in the UK right now, which is £34,500. That being said, people in their retirement typically don't need as much as an actual working adult or working household. There's usually dependents, people with kids, they're doing stuff. Life is very expensive. Whereas for retirees, tends to be a little bit less, depending on exactly what your lifestyle is. Something that is very, very interesting about the UK state pension, which is possibly the reason why the government is having issues with it, is what is the actual value of that state pension in terms of a pension pot if you want to reverse engineer it. This may also give you the answer as to why many young people are skeptical that the UK government will actually continue to provide this benefit in the way that it is now with all of the protections that are on it. Given the triple lock system that exists at the moment, it is more beneficial than any of the annuity options that we looked at before, and so we are undervaluing it a little by using the RPI version, but it's the closest match for demonstration purposes. We probably should be using the figure for 65-year-olds because the state pension is going to kick in at about 68. This is roughly about right, and it's going to offset some of the assumption that we made previously about the 5-year RPI rates being right. But if you have a £100,000 that only pays you $4,870 per year at the age of 65, the pot that you'd need to buy this equivalent of the state pension should be around £236,180. This is why people worry about, well, the state of the state pension. Despite the UK appearing to have a national debt of 2.8 trillion as of the end of 2024, things like the UK government's liability to provide state pensions to the population of this country is not accounted for here, and this alongside other unlisted potential liabilities have been estimated up into the tens of trillions by some groups. That being said, it's important to appreciate how quickly these things can change, especially when it comes to the time value of money. The Institute of Chartered Accountants has produced this fascinating graphic showing the state of the UK pension liabilities and how much it's decreased by. It's not by a small amount either. We're talking nearly half, from 2.6 trillion owed to the UK population at some point in the future down to 1.4 trillion, which is much less. This might seem confusing at first as to how this happened and how this happened so quickly in one individual year. But fundamentally, this is a concept that underpins much of investing, interest rates, and other things as well. But it effectively deals with the question of, do you want money now or some money in the future with a bit extra? Without any incentive, you're probably going to be picking money now. But the fact that interest rates exist mean that many of us will forgo cash right now if it means we're going to get something else in the future. From the government's perspective, because they're having to pay money out, this same concept works but in the reverse. With interest rates approximately zero, the government's obligation around pensions looked absolutely eye-watering. The amounts that they would have to pay out in the future, when looked at in terms of today's money, was very similar. However, ever since rates have increased again, this lowers the value of future money, simply due to the fact that you can take £100 now and earn 5% from it in the bank over a year. Thinking about it another way, if 5 years ago someone had offered you 3% interest on your cash, you'd have snapped it up in a heartbeat, effectively taking £103 for every 100 forgone today. However, at the moment, you're likely to only accept 4 or 5%, or 105 for every 100 that you've forgone now. 105 in a year is worth 100 today. 5 years ago, that was only 102. The thing about government pension liabilities, though, is that they are very long-term. They are much further away than a year's time. Many of the people that they owe this payment to are decades from retirement, and this makes the valuation of the total liability extremely sensitive to changes in interest rates because this compounds throughout all of the years that you have until you pay it. The difference in the 1-year savings amount doesn't seem very much, but the valuation difference this can make on a 20 to 40-year pension liability can change by, well, as we've seen, an incredible amount. The data here is roughly the financial year snapshot, so the 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 2023, where the liability fell by nearly 50% simply because rates went from 0.75% to 4.25% over that period. As an interesting aside, this is the same reason why bond prices go up when rates go down, and vice versa. Okay, so back to our pension data and our ages. At this point, you might be asking, is this skewed by people that don't have any pension at all? Well, yes and no. Because all of this information that we've used so far actually excludes anybody who has zero private pension savings. If you look at everyone, the numbers are far, far worse. Including all of the people that don't have any private pension savings whatsoever, you can see that this takes the 16 to 24 camp to precisely zero, because there are so many people that don't have any savings whatsoever. And even when we get up to our absolute peak, which is the 55 to 64 category, you can see now that the actual median across everybody, including those that have nothing, is now only £86,800, which is quite bad. The only glimmer of hope really here is that, as we saw before, the amount that people had in their pension pots was falling. However, in this particular case, you can see that the pension amount is increasing. It's gone all the way from £4,000 up to £19,700 as of the end of 2022. And this tells us two interesting things. Firstly, that more people are getting pensions over time. So this is actually going up, probably not by as much as everyone would like, but it is still better than nothing. This is likely due to the pension auto-enrollment that kicked in from 2012 through to 2018 and was staged through different sizes of businesses, meaning that basically everybody in a PAYE job automatically gets entered into a workplace pension to contribute towards their future retirement. By default, the employee pays in the minimum of 5% and the employer pays in 3%. So a total of 8% of your salary, which goes into this workplace pension. And now that everybody has it by default, you have to specifically opt out, which means that most people just won't and will just keep it how it is. What's interesting about this, though, is that we've moved some people from the don't have a pension at all category into the have some pension, no matter how small it might be. And so as those people get added into the active pension holders category, that actually brings down the average overall, which is maybe why we see the numbers decreasing over the years, or at least one factor which explains part of it. The number of people who have gone from having no private pension at all to having something has moved from 37% up to 45% in the end of 2020, and then very slightly down to 44% at the end of March 2022. So overall, there are more people who have an active private pension than they ever did before, which is probably a good thing, despite the fact that the values are actually quite low. So hopefully this makes you feel a bit better about your own financial situation. Where exactly do you fit into these categories? I'd love to know down in the comments. How much you actually need for your retirement is really very personal and is definitely subject for another video. So until then, I'll see you next time and thanks for watching.